Sibling rivalry. That is our topic this week on Cliff's Notes Confirmation. May the Lord be with you. This is Pastor Ryan Stout over here at St. Peter's Lutheran in lovely New York Mills. And this video is part of a series intended for our confirmation classes in case certain students are not able to make it to our usual meetings on the first and third Sundays of each month at 10:30. This year we are going through the story of the Old Testament, which for us is both the Hebrew Bible, the law, the prophets, and the writings, and the Apocrypha, the Greek Old Testament. And as we're going through the Old Testament, of course, we believe the traditional Christian hermeneutic that the New Testament is hidden in the Old, and the Old Testament is revealed in the New, which is all a way of saying that all the stories of the Bible for us focus on Jesus Christ, God made flesh, God made one of us. Now, this is going to be a relatively short video compared to our hour-long conversations together on Sunday, and even that is a shorter version of the homework, which over the next 2 weeks is Faith 5 assignments, where we read biblical verses together as a family, discuss them, pray about them, walking our way through these stories, which are so foundational to our faith. Now, thus far, you may recall, we have talked about the mythical creation of the world. Myth here not meaning false or fictional, but myth as a foundational story that makes sense of everything. And we talked about how the biblical worldview is that God is all good, the world was made good, and that people are beloved and have an important role. But if God is good and the world was made good, how did things get so screwed up? It's because people fell short of that intended important role. In the Bible, evil is not a thing with an independent creation of its own. Evil is the result of an abuse of freedom. And so after evil has sort of thrown God's plan for the world off track, he starts to play the long game by selecting a very unlikely champion in the person of Abraham, an old man who is called to leave his home and become a wanderer, an alien in a foreign land. And we talked about the story of Abraham, his wife Sarah, and their long-promised child Isaac. And we talked about how God promised that he would make of this old couple as good as dead a family, make of that family a people, make of that people a nation, and use that nation to bless all the families and the peoples of the world. We've gotten to the point in our story where Abraham and Sarah have both died and left the stage. And now we're talking about their son and heir, Isaac, and his wife, Rebekah. So if you're following along at home, we're picking up the story at Genesis chapter 25. Genesis, the first book of the first section of the Bible. And in Genesis chapter 25, verses 19 through 26, we learn that Rebekah is indeed pregnant with not one but two of Isaac's sons. We have what appears to be fraternal twins. And while she is in labor, first the midwife ties a red cord to the foot of the child who looks like he's coming out first, but then the foot recedes and his brother comes out first. And his brother is Esau, who comes out covered in red fur, a sort of hairy wild man from birth. And the second child comes out holding on to Esau's ankle, his heel, and he is named Jacob, which means basically leg puller in both senses of the term, right? Jacob's literally pulling his brother's leg as he comes out of the womb, and he is also someone who will be a trickster and a deceiver throughout life. We continue with Genesis 25, verses 27 through 34, where we see that the promise of God is passing on to this new generation. Now, skip over 2 chapters to Genesis 27. We'll read together verses 1 through 29. You can break it up if you want to in class. We're going to do 1 to 4, 5 to 17, 18 through 29. Now the boys are grown. And we've got Esau, who is still a wild man, still a still a man's man, a hunter, a person who loves going out in the wilderness, and he's dad's favorite, right? Jacob, meanwhile, it says, likes to sit in tents. Wah, 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 right? Your older brother is the super hunter who looks like Bigfoot, and you like to sit in tents. Not exactly a traditional heroic archetype, but he is his mother's favorite. He's a mama's boy, and Rebekah's favor will be Isaac's ultimate success. In chapter 27, verses 34 to 40, we get the story where Esau comes back famished from a long time out in the field, and he begs food from Jacob. And Jacob, whether he's kidding or whether he's serious, says, yeah, I'll give you this food if you give me your birthright as the elder brother. And Esau basically says, to heck with it, you can have it. And he takes and drinks, I believe it's lentil soup. And so from the beginning, we see Esau as someone who does not appear to take his role in God's promise seriously, right? As the eldest son, you would think that he would inherit the mantle of Isaac, the mantle of Abraham, the promise that God is going to bless and redeem the world through this family line. Well, he sort of flippantly throws that out the window for a bowl of soup. All right, well, fast forward a little bit more. We're going down now to Genesis 27, verses 34 through 40. And Isaac has really gotten on in years. He's basically gone blind, and he knows he's dying. So he wants to give his traditional priestly blessing to his eldest son. You know, back in these days, there is no Levitical priesthood yet. There's no seminaries. Usually, the eldest son in a given generation would serve the religious rites of the family. So he's going to bless Esau, pass on the promise, pass on the inheritance that God gave to him, gave to Isaac through his father, Abraham. But Rebekah's wheels have been turning. She waits until Esau is gone, and she disguises Jacob as his slightly elder twin. She puts goat's pelt on him so that he feels like Jacob. It's the only way he's going to be furry enough. He's going to smell like Jacob. And so Jacob goes in and pretends to be Esau, and Isaac blesses him instead, passes the mantle of primogeniture and God's promise on to Jacob. Well, it's not long before Esau comes back and realizes that he's been bamboozled. And this is the sort of blessing 4,000 years ago that really Isaac can only give once on his deathbed. So he says to Esau, he says, your brother has tricked us, and I've already promised that he will rule over you and your descendants, but I have a separate blessing for you, my son Esau, and that is that you will rebel, you will kick off his dominion. Esau is furious at his brother deceiving both himself and their father, and Jacob doesn't have a prayer next to Esau, right? The wild man hunter, the werewolf, the Bigfoot boy. And so Rebekah gives him the most sensible advice that a mother can give her younger tent-sitting son, which is run. Run away, son. Go as quick as you can. In Genesis 28, verses 10 to 17, Jacob has fled his elder brother Esau. I keep saying elder brother. Remember, they're twins. We're talking about moments elder. And he runs off. He receives God's reaffirmed promise in a dream. The famous scene of Jacob's ladder, that's in Genesis 28, 10 to 17, where he sees angels going up into heaven and descending on a ladder. And he waits and says, this is a holy place. This is the doorway, the gateway to heaven. So he knows that God is with him, even in his exile, even as he's running. You see this exile theme throughout Scripture? Adam and Eve were exiled. It comes up again and again. Abraham left his hometown. That and the preference for the little brother are two themes that we keep seeing over and over and over and over. And this inverts the usual expected hierarchy of the ancient world, right? Aliens and foreigners are not the people you choose to be your champions. The younger brother is not the one that you choose to be your inheritor. But God makes things holy by flipping them upside down. Anyway, Jacob is now a stranger in a strange land. He runs into Laban, who is a relative of his mother, and he falls in love with Laban's daughter Rachel. And Laban says, "Oh, I can't just give you my youngest daughter. You got to work for her. You got to work for 7 years before I'll let her marry you." And Jacob says, "Done." And he works for Laban for 7 years. And even as Laban tries to cheat him, Jacob deceives him so that Jacob's wealth increases and Laban's decreases. And after 7 years, there's a big wedding. Presumably, Jacob has a little bit too much to imbibe. And in the morning, after his wedding night, he wakes up and realizes that he's married Rachel's elder sister, Leah, by accident. One wonders how much wine he had at the party. And he goes to Laban and he says, "You fooled me. I worked for 7 years for the younger daughter. You gave me the elder daughter. That's not who I wanted to marry." And Laban said, "Well, this isn't done. I don't give you the younger before the elder. I had to marry her off first. But today's your lucky day. I will let you marry my younger daughter as well. You can have 2 wives as long as you promise to work for me for another 7 years." And Jacob, the deceiver, the leg puller, is now himself deceived. What can he do but agree? And now he has 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, only one of whom he wanted to marry. So anyway, there is competition between the 2 wives for the favor of their husband, right? Rachel is the one he loves. Leah is competing with her younger sister for the affections of their mutual husband. And they try to win his favor by seeing who can have the most sons. And not only that, they actually bring in their handmaids as surrogates, as additional wives for their husbands. So he's got the 2 main wives and now 2 handmaiden wives that are given to him so that Rachel and Leah can rack up a tally of kids, which seems ridiculous to modern audiences. And in fact, I think that's kind of the point of the story. There are indeed examples in the Old Testament of men marrying more than one woman at the same time. That's how the ancient world worked. But it's never a happy union. In the Bible, when there's one husband and one wife, things tend to go pretty well. When there's one husband and multiple wives, it all goes to pot. It's never a good thing. In fact, all the stories of polygamy in the Old Testament, I would argue, are arguments against it. Examples that you shouldn't follow. Regardless, eventually, Jacob flees from Laban, who's sick of his son-in-law getting the better of him, and he goes with all his wives, all his children, and he starts to head back to his home turf. But the problem is, he's still terrified of Esau, his elder brother. And he's afraid that Esau is going to find him and kill him. So he does kind of a cowardly thing. He starts to string out all of his flocks, his herds, his shepherds, his servants, including his wives and sons, all out ahead of him. The ones he doesn't like so much are in the front. Rachel and her children are closest to him in the back. But he's clearly expecting to be assaulted by Esau's men and to lose all he has. He has a dream in the night. It's not a dream really. Someone comes and wakes him and attacks him in the night, and he thinks it's his brother Esau, and they wrestle and they wrestle and they wrestle. And the sun is coming up, and the person he's wrestling with knocks Jacob's hip out of joint, trying to get away from him. But Jacob still says, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Right? If this is Esau, I'm not going to let him go because he'll kill me. So I won't let him go until he blesses me. He promises not to hurt me. But of course, it ends up that this person in the night is not Jacob, or Esau rather. It's not Esau. The person wrestling Jacob is an angel, or even the Lord himself. And as the sun is rising, if Jacob actually sees him face to face, he'll die. Right? You can't look right on the face of God in the Old Testament. So the angel or the manifestation of the Lord blesses Jacob and gives him a new name, calls him Israel. For he has wrestled with God and man and prevailed. I mean, that's what Israel means, one who struggles, who wrestles with God. And the angel vanishes, and Jacob, now Israel, says, "I've seen the face of the Lord." Anyway, the story, this part of it ends in a wonderful way, because he hears that Esau is coming with his men, and he keeps sending gifts ahead of him. Please take these goats, take these sheep, take all this stuff. Just don't hurt me. Let us pass. And Esau finally comes up to Jacob with all his armed men. And Jacob is terrified that this is, at last is the reckoning he's deserved since they were children. And Esau comes up and embraces him and kisses him and weeps at joy that he's been reunited with his little brother, his younger twin, Jacob. So here is this image of Esau, the big, bad, offended party who is coming for vengeance, and Jacob who's going to get his due and he can't defend himself because he's a weenie. And instead he finds grace and mercy and reconciliation and love. Esau has no bad feelings. He's had a good life. God has blessed him. And he's just happy that Jacob is back. And I think that's the most wonderful twist in just about any biblical story of the Old Testament. Okay, so all of that, by the way, the reunion is in Genesis 32, verses 22 to 32, and brothers are reunited in Genesis 33, 1 to 4, for those following along at home. Okay, skipping ahead to the story of Joseph. I'm really going to make it quick. There have been some great movies adapting the story of Joseph. It's a long and wonderful tale that we just don't have time to get into in any detail here, but here's a short version. Remember, Jacob had those 4 wives, Rachel and Leah and their handmaids, and 12 sons. A couple daughters too, it looks like, but the sons are the ones that get the mention. And these 12 sons are going to be the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, his favorite son, and Jacob does indeed play favorites, is a young man named Joseph, who is child of Rachel, his favorite wife. And he pampers Joseph as sort of the baby, and this makes his elder brothers jealous on a number of levels. So in Genesis 37, verses 1 to 11, we meet Joseph the dreamer, because he gets these sort of divine visions in his sleep that help him to prepare for the future. He is an interpreter of dreams. I've always found it interesting that Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, said that his favorite biblical story was the story of Joseph, who found meaning interpreting dreams. So anyway, Joseph is sent by his father to go check on his brothers. They're sick of this guy. They say, look, here's what we're doing. We're going to kill him. Okay? We don't have to worry about him. Oh, we'll tell Dad that a lion did it, right? Some kind of wild animal. But he is defended by at least some of his brothers who say, no. Don't kill him. Just tell Dad that a lion got him. Let's figure something else out to do with him. Oh, look, there is a caravan of Ishmaelites wandering through the desert. Let's sell him to them, sell him into slavery. So they sell their brother into slavery. They tell Dad that he was eaten by a lion. Dad is very sad. And Joseph is taken to Egypt, where he is sold to Potiphar, a wealthy man of Egypt. And he is, he's a good steward. He's a wonderful servant to Potiphar. He's favored in the house. He ends up being falsely accused of trying to assault Potiphar's wife. And because of this, he is thrown into jail down in Egypt. First you're slave, now you're in prison for a crime you didn't commit. Not everything is coming up Joseph, right? All right, so Genesis chapter 41, verses 1 through 13. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, has a dream in which there are 7 fat, sleek cows that are eaten by 7 scary-looking, scrawny zombie cows, right? And then he has another dream where 7 big, fat ears of grain are consumed by 7 withered zombie stands of grain. And he wants to know, what on earth does this mean? It's freaking me out. And he brings in all his diviners and his interpreters, and they can't tell him squat. Well, it ends up that Pharaoh's cupbearer had been in jail for a while, and that's where he had met Joseph, who had interpreted the dreams of the prisoners in prison. And he says, hey, Pharaoh, I know this guy. And they bring forward Joseph. Joseph says, look, it's not me who interprets the dreams. It's God who works his promise through me. And here's the deal, Pharaoh. what you're dreaming about is a prophecy that there's going to be 7 really good years in Egypt where there's going to be more than enough for everybody, and that'll be followed by 7 years of famine. And because you've had the same basic dream twice, that means that it's fixed. This event is going to happen. What you need to do, Pharaoh, is get ready for it now that you know it's coming. Pharaoh says, fantastic, I feel so much better. Now I know what this dream means. I'm going to put you, Joseph, in charge of storing up excess in the 7 good years so that Egypt will have plenty in the 7 bad years. That's exactly what happens. Joseph ends up being the right-hand man to the king of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. And Egypt not only survives when the 7 years of drought and famine come, but thrives because everyone else has to come to Egypt in order to buy grain. And so Pharaoh's making money hand over fist. Anyway, to make a long story short, too late, up there in Canaan, in the land of Israel, Israel's other 11 sons are as hungry as anybody else. And Israel says to his sons, go down to Egypt, see if you can buy grain. They go down there. They do not recognize Joseph because, of course, it's been a long time. He is speaking the Egyptian tongue, not Hebrew. He's talking to them through interpreters, and he's all done up as a great servant of Pharaoh. They have no idea that it's him. And so Joseph does kind of screw with them a little bit. He is still the leg puller. He is still the deceiver. But ultimately what happens is he finally says in Hebrew, it's me, it's Joseph, your brother. And his brothers all freak out and they're like, oh no, we're going to die. We sold this guy into slavery and now he's, practically Pharaoh. We're up a creek. But Joseph, instead of killing or torturing them or selling them into slavery, weeps for joy and falls upon them and embraces them and kisses him, just like Esau did with Jacob in the previous generation. And he says, is my father alive? My youngest brother, my brother from Rachel, is he still back home? And they bring Jacob in his old age down to Egypt. Everyone associated with the 12 tribes, their flocks, their herds, their servants, their wives, their children, they all come down to Egypt. Jacob is overjoyed to see Joseph alive, his favorite son, and Joseph settles his family, what will be the 12 tribes, in a beautiful, lush area of the river delta in Egypt, where they can serve as herdsmen, which is actually a job that the Egyptians don't like doing anyway, so they're kind of glad to have this other people come in and occupy these fertile areas and raise their sheep. And so Genesis, the book of Genesis, ends with the people of Israel, the family of Abraham, well on their way to knowing the fulfillment of God's promise, living and prospering and happy in the land of Egypt. Note again, I mentioned a little earlier, the preference for the younger sibling, for Isaac over Ishmael, for Jacob over Esau, for Joseph over his 11 brothers. And note also this theme of exile. Abraham left his home. Jacob left his home. And now all of Israel as a family now, not just the one guy Israel, though the whole family has left their home and come down to settle in Egypt. And so Genesis ends on a very happy note, but it sets us up for a twist, a turn at the beginning of the next book of the Bible, which is Exodus. And we will pick that up next time. Go in peace, serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.